Working the night shift at Walmart was usually uneventful. The store was quiet, the aisles empty except for the occasional restocking or a last-minute shopper rushing to grab essentials. But there was one night that changed everything, a night that still haunts me to this day. It was a stormy evening, with the rain lashing against the windows and the wind howling through that parking lot. I had just clocked in for my shift, joining the skeleton crew responsible for keeping the store running through the night. My job was to monitor the security cameras and assist with any customer inquiries. As the hours dragged on, the store became eerily quiet. The usual hum of activity was replaced by the rhythmic patter of rain and the occasional creak of the building settling. Around midnight, I decided to take a walk around the store to break the monotony. As I walked through the dimly lit aisles, my flashlight casting long shadows on the shelves, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I chalked it up to the storm in the late hour, but the sense of unease persisted. When I reached the electronics section, I noticed something odd. One of the TVs was on, displaying static and emitting a low, crackling noise. I approached it, intending to turn it off, when a flash of movement caught my eye. For a split second, I saw a figure on the screen, a woman with long, dark hair staring directly at me. Her eyes were hollow and lifeless, and her mouth was twisted into a grotesque smile. I blinked and the image vanished, replaced by the static once more. My heart raced, and I tried to convince myself that it was just a trick of the light, a glitch in the system. I turned off the TV and quickly walked away, my footsteps echoing in the empty aisles. Returning to the security office, I reviewed the footage from the cameras, hoping to find some explanation for what I had seen. The screens displayed the store's layout in grainy black and white, but there was nothing out of the ordinary, just the empty aisles and the flickering lights. I switched to the feed from the electronics section and rewound the tape to the moment I had seen the figure on the TV. There it was, just as I remembered, a brief flash of the woman's face, staring out from the screen. But what sent chills down my spine was what happened next. Now, as the footage played, I saw myself approaching the TV and turning it off. But behind me, in the darkness of the aisle, was the same woman standing silently, her eyes fixed on my back. She moved with unnatural speed, disappearing just as I turned around. I leaned back in my chair, my skin prickling with fear. I had never believed in ghosts or the supernatural, but there was no other explanation for what I had seen. I knew I couldn't stay in the office, not with the woman's image still burned into my mind. I decided to find my coworkers and see if they had noticed anything strange. I found Lisa, the night manager, in the grocery section, restocking shelves. "Hey, have you seen anything weird tonight?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked at me puzzled. "Weird? What do you mean?" I hesitated, unsure of how to explain. "I just thought I saw something on the cameras. A woman." Lisa frowned. "A woman? There's no one here except us and the janitor. Maybe you're just tired." "Maybe," I agreed, though I knew what I had seen was real. "Just keep an eye out, okay?" She nodded and I continued my rounds, my nerves on edge. The rest of the night passed without incident, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see the woman lurking in the shadows. As my shift neared its end, I decided to check the cameras one last time. I settled into the chair and scanned the feeds, my eyes darting from screen to screen. Everything seemed normal until I reached the footage from the storage room. There, in the corner of the screen, was the woman. She stood in the shadows, her face obscured, but unmistakably her. I watched in horror as she moved closer to the camera, her eyes locking onto mine through the screen. She raised a hand and the feed cut to static. I jumped up, my heart pounding, and ran to the storage room. I threw open the door, half expecting to see her standing there. But the room was empty, the only sound the faint hum of the fluorescent lights. I backed out of the room, my hands shaking. I didn't know what to do, how to make sense of what I had seen. As I turned to leave, a cold breeze swept through the room, carrying with it a whisper that sent chills down my spine. "You're next." I didn't wait to find out what that meant. I ran out of the store, not stopping until I was safely in my car. I didn't look back as I drove away, the rain pounding on the roof and the wind howling around me. I quit my job the next day, I couldn't face another night in that store, not after what I had seen. To this day, I don't know who or what the woman was, but I can't shake the feeling that she's still there, waiting in the shadows, watching for her next victim. And every time I drive past that Walmart, I shiver, remembering the cold, hollow eyes that stared back at me from the darkness. Walmart's night shift was usually uneventful, a calm reprieve from the bustling crowds of the daytime. But every employee had heard the rumors about aisle 13, the aisle that seemed to have a life of its own. I was skeptical of ghost stories. I took the job for the steady paycheck, not expecting anything more than the usual late-night restocking and customer service. But that changed one rainy night when I encountered something I couldn't explain. The rain was relentless, beating against the windows and creating a dull, rhythmic thrum throughout the store. Around 3 a.m., I was pushing a cart loaded with merchandise towards the infamous aisle 13, which housed the cleaning supplies and hardware. It was a routine trip, one I'd made countless times before. As I approached the aisle, I noticed the lights flickering. It wasn't unusual for the old fluorescent bulbs to act up, but there was something off about the way they dimmed and brightened, almost as if they were pulsing in time with my heartbeat. I hesitated at the entrance, peering down the aisle. The shelves stood tall and silent, casting long shadows that stretched towards me. I took a deep breath and pushed the cart forward, the wheels squeaking against the linoleum. Halfway down the aisle, I heard a soft rustling sound. I stopped and listened, my ears straining to catch any further noise. It came again, a faint whispering, like the rustle of dry leaves. I turned slowly, shining my flashlight down the aisle, but saw nothing unusual. I continued stocking the shelves, trying to ignore the growing sense of unease. The whispers grew louder, more distinct, but the words were incomprehensible, like a distant conversation just out of earshot. I glanced around nervously, but the aisle was empty, save for me and my cart. Suddenly, a can of paint fell from the top shelf, landing with a thud at my feet. I jumped, my flashlight slipping from my grasp and clattering to the floor. As I bent to pick it up, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Reflected in the shiny metal of the paint can was the faint outline of a figure standing behind me. It was a woman, her face pale and her eyes hollow. She wore an old-fashioned dress, tattered and stained, and her expression was one of deep sadness. I spun around, my heart racing, but there was no one there. The aisle was empty, the only sound the echo of my ragged breathing. I backed away, my hands shaking, and almost tripped over the cart in my haste to leave. As I stumbled out of aisle 13, the whispers faded, replaced by the steady hum of the store's fluorescent lights. I didn't stop running until I reached the break room, where I found my coworker Jim sitting with a cup of coffee. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, chuckling. I tried to laugh, but it came out as a choked sob. "Aisle 13, I managed to say. There's something in aisle 13. Jim's expression turned serious. "You saw her, didn't you?" I nodded, too shaken to speak. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant. "Her name was Martha. She worked here back in the 70s, before the store was remodeled. One night, she was stocking shelves when a shelf collapsed on her. She died instantly, crushed under the weight." He sighed, staring into his coffee. "They say her spirit never left. She's been seen in aisle 13 ever since, trying to finish her last shift. I didn't go back to aisle 13 for the rest of the night. In fact, I avoided it as much as possible from then on. But whenever I passed by, I could feel her presence, a cold, lingering shadow that watched me from the corners of the store. And on stormy nights, when the rain pounds against the windows and the lights flicker just so, I swear I can still hear her whispers, calling out from aisle 13, waiting for someone to help her find peace."